So, are you there thinking we haven't had any new chart types in Excel in ages? We'd love to have some new chart types. Well, we don't have any new chart types in Excel, but instead I'm going to show you how we can use the Chart.JS framework so that we can create charts that aren't natively available inside Excel. So it's just like having a charting update with new chart formats. So if you're ready, let's get started. To get these new chart types into Excel, we're going to use a website called QuickChart.io. It generates charts based on the Chart.js framework, and we can create them just using a URL. So here's the homepage that we have here at QuickChart.io. I'm simply going to highlight the text here, Control-C to copy that, and then I'll come across into Excel. I'm going to paste that URL into cell B5. Next, I've got this section here that I've already merged together into a larger area, and I'm just going to type equals image, open bracket. I'll select cell B5. I don't want any alt text, but for sizing, let's say I want it to fit the cell. So I'll enter a 0, close the bracket and press return. Fantastic, look at that. That chart has now been generated inside my Excel worksheet. Now, if you're thinking all I've done is copied an image, well, that's true, but this image is dynamic because if I come back into my data and change one of the values, so the value was 50, let's change that to be 300. And when we do this, we should see this blue bar increase here. So watch that area. I'll press return. Fantastic, that chart is now generated. So each time that we send across this URL, it generates a new image for us, which means as long as we can manipulate text to create a suitable URL, that we can actually create these as dynamic charts. For this solution, we are using the image function, which means that we can only use this in Excel 365 or Excel Online at present. So let's move on and see how we can achieve that. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can build a dynamic URL. Let's start by looking at the original URL that we got from QuickChart at the start. Let's have a look at this structure. So https://quickchart.io, so that is the website, and then chart?C equals. So this is how QuickChart defines different charting engines. Then after that, it says the word type and the word bar. So therefore, it's a good chance that because this says bar, that it is a bar chart. And there's different chart types that we can use. After that, it has the word data and then a colon, and then in curly brackets, it says labels, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. After that, it then has data sets, then the word label users, and then the data 50, 60, 70, and 180, and then the word label, and then revenue, and then data 100, 200, 300, 400. So when we break this down, there's different elements of this URL that if we can make it dynamic, it means that we can make this chart work to our requirements. So in effect, we have a text string with various placeholders that we can change. So rather than Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, that is effectively just a placeholder for where we put labels. Equally here, where we have the term users, well, that's just a placeholder for what the first series is called. The next section, data, well, that's really just another placeholder, isn't it? We can put other data into there. And the same is true for revenue. So that's a series 2 placeholder. And then 100, 200, 300, 400, that's kind of a data 2 placeholder. So if we're able to replace these sections that are placeholders with our data, we're then able to create a completely dynamic chart. So here I've created a table in Excel which has the labels Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. It has a column called users and a column called revenue and the data for each of those items. I've then used formulas so we can calculate those placeholders in the correct format. So for example, here we have the text join function, and we can see that when we look at the labels, each of those labels is separated by a comma, and each label is surrounded in a single quote character. So in text join, we've said that our delimiter is a comma. We've said that we don't want to ignore anything that's empty. And then we have concatenated our column together. So we've entered a single quote character and then picked up the label and then ended with another single quote character. So that means our labels section calculates in exactly the right format as we needed to use for our URL. Users is just linked to our column header. If we look at our data, the format of that is a comma separated list, but it doesn't have single quotes around it. So again, we've used the text join function with a delimiter between each item is a comma. We are not ignoring any empty values. Then we just need to list out all of the items from that column. Then we've repeated that for series 2 and then also data 2, which means that when it comes to creating our final URL, we've got the standard part of that at the start, and then we've replaced each of those placeholders by linking to the relevant cells. So now, if we change our cell values, that chart updates and renders automatically. Not only that, but if we insert a new row, so call this FY plus 1 Q1, and we give this values of 200 and 200, you'll see that this now appears on our chart. So by manipulating text in this way and linking it to a table, we can create these charts that are completely dynamic and we can display them inside Excel. I know what you're thinking. We can already create column charts in Excel. How is this any kind of improvement? Well, in a few moments' time, we're going to look at some of the other chart types that we have available because of this Chart.JS framework. Okay, so everything seems good so far, but what happens if we close the workbook and reopen it? Let's do that. So Excel has started, but you can see we have this hash field error and our chart isn't displayed. However, as soon as we calculate anything at all, the image then refreshes and the error disappears. Therefore, if we add a volatile function onto our worksheet, it means that when we open our workbook, it will automatically trigger a calculation refresh. So all I'm going to do here in cell P3 is type equal today. So today is a volatile function. That means that will now calculate. I'm going to save this workbook and close it. And now when I reopen Excel, it means that that chart now generates correctly. And this volatile function only has to be on one worksheet. All of the charts in this workbook have also regenerated. In an ideal world, we would all be experts in the Chart.JS framework, but let's face it, most of us probably aren't. However, over at QuickChart, they have a chart gallery. So if I click on that link, here is a gallery of charts that people have already made and created using this framework. You can see there's lots of different chart styles and methods there that we can't normally generate inside Excel. So let's pick one that's reasonably simple. Let's go for the progress bar. So if I click on that, it shows us the code that we need to use. There's two sections. There's the main code section, and then up here there's the charting engine that we need to use. So I'm going to start by copying /chart?C equals. I'll bring that across into my Excel worksheet. I'm going to paste that in here. So I've already got the start of that URL. I've then added the charting engine. I've got a space on the front there. Let me just take that off. And then that's been built up into this URL that we can see here. So now let's get the syntax. And we'll copy that, Control-C, then head back into Excel and we'll paste that into this cell. Then let's use our image function again, equals image, open bracket. My source is going to be that URL, comma, alt text will be blank, comma, and then sizing, I'm going to put a 0 so it fits to the cell. Fantastic, so that now generates this image. And as we saw before, we can easily change these values. So if I change this into a text formula, we can now dynamically create this text. So if my value changes to 100, fantastic, it now shows 100% complete. So that means we can look down this chart gallery and find other examples of charts that we might like and that we might want to copy. So just to show you a few other examples here, we have a step chart with days across the bottom and then numbers down the left, and that's all controlled by this table. We also have a Sankey diagram. These are really difficult, if not impossible, to create well inside Excel. But here we have this Sankey diagram, which is all controlled by this table. And all of this syntax comes from that chart gallery, where all I've done is replaced the relevant values in my table. Or another example, we've got a line here, but we've got this large red marker and some text over the top. And again, this is all based on that same principle of taking what's already there in the QuickChart.io gallery and then replacing the values or other elements so that it fits with our scenario. Another feature that they have on QuickChart.io is that they have a chart maker. So here we can create a template of what we want our chart to look like. So we've got our labels there and a data set. We can change our chart type. We can change the colors that we want to use and the border width and the angles. We can add more data sets. We can add other information. And then once we've done that, once we've created our chart exactly as we want it, we can click on the Save as API template. And here we can see the basic URL that we might want to use, but it also gives us all of these dynamic placeholders that we can use so that we can link them into Excel cells. So you can see here in this one, if we wanted our data to be dynamic, this would be our full URL, but we just need to link this section here into our cell values. So as a basic illustration of this, you can see that I've used the chart maker, and by double clicking on that, you can see the elements of that URL, and I've just replaced the values with the items from my table. And that's then used to generate this bar chart that you can see here. Well, that's it. That's how we can use the Chart.JS framework inside Excel. Now, I've got a few tips and tricks for you if you want to implement this method. Firstly, URLs have a character limit, which means we can't send huge amounts of data across to QuickChart.io. So it's a good idea to use trim and clean and remove as many spaces as we can to keep those URLs short, so we try not to exceed that limit. Also, we want to remove any code comments. So code comments are anything in that code that start with // they actually will stop our chart from working. Thirdly, if we're using formulas with text, Excel gives us a 255 character limit for any section inside some double quotes. So that means that if we get that warning that our text string is too long, we need to break that down by using a double quote, then an ampersand, and then another double quote. So we're breaking that string into 2 individual elements. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.